Yep.
All right. Hello, everyone. We are in our last workshop in this series. It's been a pretty full 2 days. We're so happy to offer this to you and to have such a wide attendance. So thank you for tuning in and being such an active member to all of our attendees of the presentations that we're offering. So the comments, the Q&A, everything has been really live. We appreciate the engagement. I'm most impressed by the fact that we have had five panels, all super diverse, different panelists for each segment, of people willing to just come forward and share their experiences and their insights. So we could not do these without the wonderful panelists. So just constantly shouting out to all of them and appreciative and respectful and grateful of what you're all offering. So I'm going to share my slides here. For our last topic of our 2-day conference, which is community building, peers, systems, and resources. So I'm going to give a few slides of education around this, and then we're going to segue into a panel where I'll present a series of questions. And please feel free at that time to enter your questions in the Q&A as well. And we'll see if there's a few that we could pull from that. Okay. So why do we do these? Why do we do the education? Why are we, driven to improve competency? And in general, as clinicians, this is my dog's tail. I'm so sorry. He's like getting involved. Um, why are we driven to do this work as clinicians? Why are you all signed on today, right? Early in my career working with first responders and veterans, this came up a lot, this call to action, like your why, right? That's what we would call it. Like what's your why? Why do you do this work? And the accountability word would come up a lot because, veterans serve the country. They are the minority in the country, and part of that service is protecting civilians and our ability to live the lives we live safely. So on the community side, it's our responsibility. We're accountable for kind of like welcoming them back into these systems that are meant to support them. So that's my why. Like I'm driven by the fact that this is the minority that's done so much for us. Um, but that framing idea of like the call to action is sometimes wrapped around mission, purpose, passion, why you might be interested in working with veterans, for example. And it's also wrapped around the statistics that we're going to go into a bit, because for many reasons, veterans can be vulnerable, susceptible to certain risks. So when we talk about risk factors in the community, there are, areas that get hit sometimes, as far as like where support is missing and where some of the pieces might be missing for what we are offering. So we'll go into that a little bit too, because it plays into this call to action and this question of like how do we build our communities better to sustain and support the needs of the veteran community. All right. So we're going back to this slide that was from yesterday, right? So people enter into the military from different paths, thousands, millions of different paths, right? Um, and each person's experiences and the implications of that are distinctive and different and have a different set of needs. So I want to go back to that when we're now talking about like very specifically building resources and building systems that support the diversity of those needs. So these are just not basic ordinary trainings that we're offering. These are all built into this call to action, where our goal is to increase awareness, competence, understanding, and support. And we want to collaborate, on the community side to create this new and improved veteran civilian culture. So why is competence important? It goes without saying, but it helps us to build our community, to build our resources, helps us to stay current. This is a big one. So I've been doing this work for just over 15 years, and like the culture of healthcare services, mental health services, veteran services has evolved so greatly just in that relatively short time. Um, so all of that, to say staying current is not just about like learning what the new best trauma therapy is, although that's part of it. I apologize for my dog misbehaving. Staying current is also about keeping ourselves up to date with regards to the culture of today, the culture of healthcare today, and again, where those gaps are. Like I've learned a lot through identifying gaps and then trying to figure out ways to, loopholes or, if you will, just like different avenues to connect people with the resources they need, accepting the fact that these gaps do exist. Improves our overall performance, and then back to this notion of like not knowing something can actually be harmful. So this idea of civic duty, right? This accountability on the civilian side, on the healthcare side, to support the needs of the veteran community and their families, in the military community. Um, that really can give a sense of empowerment when you're not sure. Like, am I built as a clinician to work with veterans? Is that something I'm able to do? Um, just like with any population, like if you think that maybe, then probably you are, right? And just that sense of like, yes, let's do this because there is a huge need out there. So when we are kind of like categorizing or dissecting the needs of veterans, they can go into all of the layers that we discussed in the previous workshops. But to break it down like in the most basic way possible, right? We can have, and I try not to pull my stuff from Google because it's, so like linear that way. I tried to fill it in based on what I've seen, right? Working with veterans over the years, right? So wellness, employment, peers, mental health, physical health, medical health, right? Family, legal issues, benefits, navigating benefits. For some, it's housing, it's community support, social support. For some, it's as little as like I would like to go every quarter to an event in the community that veterans go to. Can be anything, can be a hike, can be a drum circle. I'm very involved in drum circles. And it could be as much as my medical needs, my mental health needs, and my benefits all need to be explored and figured out, right? Like, and anywhere in between. So, and again, this evolves over time. So, just being prepared to have these conversations and to point people in the right direction, because it's fair to say that as a clinician, you might not be suited to meet all of these needs, but being able to be kind of like a resource directory. I know in the last workshop, one of the panelists said that Melanie, um, kind of the brains behind the operation with this. She's a wealth of knowledge with regards to resources, and I just think that that's so vital as well for us as clinicians, just to understand what's out there and to make referrals when needed. So building in peer resources with that in mind, I am not a veteran. I did not serve. If I'm working with somebody who needs to speak to another veteran, it's important that I identify that and connect them with that person, right? With the understanding that I will serve in the capacity that I am with them, but they may need something outside of what I'm offering. Assistance with navigating the VA and community agencies, and then just identifying the needs, like sitting with somebody and identifying what are the needs that you have right now, short and long term. So quite simply, unfortunately, it feels stigmatizing sometimes when you look at this from a clinical lens because someone might want to just come into your office and work on like prevention skills, like life goals and goal setting and family and things like that. But more often, unfortunately, we see these things, right? Like we see people that have chronic pain or insomnia or anxiety, post-traumatic stress, because we as a community, all of us, tend to wait until it's unmanageable before we reach out for help. We wait until it's reached one of these things, right? So hopelessness, loss of identity. I'm completely lost. I don't know what to do with myself. I'm disconnected from my family. I was kicked out. My spouse kicked me out. Or I have trauma that's been unresolved for years and now it's keeping me awake at night, right? Like it could be any of these things, but the transitional challenges that we see in our offices are usually more severe than preventive. So, and those are more like the psychological emotional challenges, but then there's people that have medical issues, right? And some often they're tied together. So we had brought up during our prep meeting like environmental risks, that someone who serves is exposed to. And this can vary service to service, era to era in terms of when somebody serves, if they are overseas, if they are not. But in general, exposure to these risks is part of serving in the military, right? The potential exposure to these risks. And then for some, unfortunately, exposure to them. So chemicals, nuclear weapons, right? Agent Orange, it's a big one for Vietnam era veterans, contaminated water, explosives. These are all risks that are inherent in the job. And if somebody's talking to you about like presumptive conditions, this comes up a lot too. Those are basically conditions that are correlated directly with one's service. Um, and oftentimes they're like respiratory, pulmonary, cancer related or trauma related. There are more, but these are pretty common. So I bring up all of this kind of like doom and gloom stuff first because it segues into, hey, there are needs out there that we need to address, right? Like this is all the call to action. And then the next part is like community building. How do we do it? What can we do better? Like let's be proactive. And then of course I'm going to queue up the panelists and they're going to go into these things as well. But yeah, there's some stats and rates that really are eye-opening. We know some of them already, and I think these are a few years back, but like you get the idea. The trajectory hasn't changed much over the past 5 to 10 years, but suicide rates are up, overdose rates are up, unemployment rates are up for veterans, divorce rates even, right? Like if we just want to talk about quality of life, employment rates, right? A lot of veterans struggle with finding work after leaving the service because they have uh, this comprehensive list of skills that apply very specifically to like first responder services, and then they are not sure what to do with them beyond that. Exposure to trauma, gaps in transitions, a couple of stats here that I wanted to pull. More than 80% of civilian organizations have no veteran-specific recruiting programs, and more than 50% offer no onboarding or transition support to veteran hires, right? Like stuff that's, might not be seen as a critical need, but could snowball and escalate to somebody not finding a job and therefore not being able to have the quality of life that they're looking for. And maybe that person starts to isolate, right? And one thing leads to another. 35% of veterans say they have trouble paying their bills in the first few years after leaving the military, right? So we're talking about transitional gaps here. And then, not to mention the idea that there are some heavy psychological issues that veterans are again faced with as like risk factors for joining the service. And this can lead to feelings of hopelessness or like dead ends. I don't know where to turn, right? And they can be related to loss, complicated loss and bereavement, or just being exposed to difficult situations over and over again to the point where someone might feel hopeless or helpless or have black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, which usually doesn't end well. So where are the gaps? And I'm gonna ask the panelists at some point their opinion on this. Gaps in service. It's going to vary depending on where the person is. Like some people will say, I had a great experience with my local VA, and then I saw an outpatient provider who specialized in working with veterans, and I got the medical care I needed. I connected with a peer group in the community. They're going to say all of these things worked out for them. That's what we want to hear. Geographically, the geography dictates this to an extent. resources that are available, and kind of where they start their journey of looking for support. Some people just start in the wrong place where maybe the services are not prevalent. Um, and then that turns them away from continuing to look. And then, this is what we don't want, people falling through the cracks. In general, in healthcare, obviously, this happens. Hate to hear these stories. And this can happen with other, populations as well, obviously, just like the system, so to speak, is not always set up in the most streamlined way. And some people get kind of lost in navigating that. So now let's be proactive for a minute. The question is, how do we create more sustainable systems? Right? Like the call to action in terms of building our resources and building our communities. What does it mean to truly support veterans? Not just for credit, because some companies have like hiring credits, but then like no credit for retention, for example. I've heard this a lot. What are longer term recovery plans that we could look at? Ways to support multiple life areas at once, as opposed to saying, let's look at these 10 things in a sequence that doesn't make sense to the person and it becomes segregated. So we're talking about truly meeting the needs. I always like to bring in a couple of references, and attendees usually want a reading list or book list. Joseph Campbell writes a lot about the hero's journey. So if you want to look up a pretty good author, Joseph Campbell talks about 3 stages of the warrior's journey: departure, initiation, and return. And there's some content in there about the return and the community being an active part of that phase. And how, in ancient times, years ago, the community was more active in welcoming warriors home. And we've kind of grown away from that in like the modern day of how we operate. This is a pretty cool transformational model that you could also find information about if you look this up, Soldier's Heart. But if you look at the actual points on it, like the restoration and community, right? And like acknowledgement of the old self, homecoming, grief, loss, culture shock, anger, pain, and displacement, making meaning, seeking spirituality, brotherhood, sisterhood, transformation, like these kind of buzzwords when we talk about the phases of reintegration. Some of them are linear, like medical needs and benefits, and some of them are deeper. And I find that those the needs areas all run parallel to each other. Like they're all relevant. Skip forward a little bit just for sake of time. So things that I've found effective, beneficial, and I'm also going to ask the panelists, like, what are some techniques that you have experienced or seen with others that you have found to be beneficial? People always ask for services, like what can we recommend? So this is a list of services I personally have been like trained in working with first responders. Anything that can help someone to downregulate, can be yoga, can be breathing, narrative processing, which can be done through art, writing, or just storytelling, resiliency building skills, different types of trauma therapies, different types of expressive therapies. Also, I didn't put it on here, but anything experiential that has movement involved. Like I've been involved even in kayak trips where groups of veterans go out and then you do like a talking circle afterwards. It's real anything that's like movement based seems to be very effective. I did put it on this list. So nature-based programs, things that pave the way for camaraderie and connections to peers, catharsis, so releasing whatever that person has stored, whether it's memories or just frustrations or sadness, connection to purpose. So we talked about this yesterday too, and I do like to just like tie in some of the past workshops into the last one to do full circle. But this idea of public truth telling, if you recall, just has to do with holding space in groups for stories to be heard, and there's great value in that. So any space where there could be a group of like two or more, I'll say, of veterans talking together or experiencing something together has great value. So what is universal for most people? Best case scenario, there are two things. They are going back to home and they're going back to community. So potentially home can provide this list of benefits, potentially. Safety, security, purpose. This is what we want home to feel like, right? Acceptance, love, and nurturance. For some, it doesn't. But generally, it's a pretty universal like desire for somebody to have some sense of home, even if it's just like an apartment that they feel comfortable in. For some, it might be a large family system, right? And then community, whatever that looks like, can be tied into a career, into work, into colleagues, school, job opportunities. But basically, community is like connection with others. How do they navigate connection with others? So resources, for better or worse, are continuously growing. Some of them are not great. Some of them are fantastic, right? So helping people to navigate those. And what I've found to be the best resources are ones that are coordinated with each other, not segregated, encompassing, meaning bringing in multiple life areas at once, diverse, because we are not one size fits all, and veterans are definitely not one size fits all. They have different needs, holistic and progressive, but also evidence-based, like this is known to be effective, and just highly individualized. Like I like to offer somebody multiple different options so they could sit and tell me, well, this is something that I think would work for me. This is just like a snapshot of what most veterans want integration to feel like. And unfortunately, sometimes it feels like this. And our job, I feel in the community, especially as clinicians, like we are trained professionals to help support people, is to help them find this empowerment, this success, you know, the outcome that they're looking for through whatever avenue that is. Part of that is supporting veterans in the workforce. I know we talked about this topic potentially for the next set of trainings that we do. I think it's a great topic. And we talked yesterday about like the list of skills that veterans have, and this list goes on, but it's a big topic area in terms of like supporting transitions in a way that's a little bit outside of the box, because it might not be something that comes to mind first, but it's definitely a missing piece in the community. So talking about these things, step one, like we, should be aware of them. We should act, collaborate, advocate, advise, not be afraid to jump in and work with veterans and their families. And then we keep going back to this active listening. It's come up in almost every single workshop, but it really enables us to be better prepared, gives us a clear sense of what's being asked or stated, and offers validation to the person who's talking to you. That alone can build a baseline competency. If you have no competency at all working with a population, but you actively listen to what that person is telling you, that's step one in terms of building your own competency. So food for thought, these are just other areas that we would like to explore in the future. So just wanted to give kind of like a teaser into that, including supporting veterans in the workforce, but advocacy efforts and empowering veterans via education, because learning should be ongoing. I am constantly learning new things about working with veterans and their families, and as it should be, right? So I'm glad that we're all here today to learn and to listen. And we now offer you this final workshop of our 2-day conference. Gonna segue over into this group of panelists on the topic of building peer systems and resources and community building. So my first question, I think, would be great if you each could just introduce yourself and why you're on this panel today.
Hey, why don't I start if I'm first on the list? Is that okay? Okay, thanks.
Go
I'm
for
still
it. You got the thumbs up.
I appreciate that. I'm still on the picture of the wedding party being attacked by the sharks on the ice. That's created some, I don't know, post-traumatic experiences, not to minimize it. So my name is Ward. I've just retired from private practice, maybe 25 years, and I'm still an LCSW-R until like I can clear that up, and moved into the world of business. So make that might come up later, but I came home from Afghanistan in 2006 and began that private practice. So it's been a bit. But I was a company commander with the 25th Infantry Division, 2004, 5, 6, and was 10 years in the Army. Good for now.
Thank you, Ward. Who would like to go next?
I volunteer Jeremy as tribute because he's next on the list.
Oh, I saw Tim. I was waiting for him to.
Y'all need so much order in your life still. Come on.
I thought we started a trend here from the beginning. So, all right. Well, hello everyone. My name's Jeremy Duers. I'm the peer-to-peer coordinator up here for the Dwyer project in the Adirondacks of New York, which is about 4 hours north of New York City and probably about an hour and a half south of the Canadian border. So it's beautiful country up here. Difficult to explain to folks when you say you're from New York and they're like, oh yes, skyscrapers and subways. And I'm like, no, mountains and trees. So I'm here today because I'm an advocate of peer support. I think as I've gone along through this because my background, originally I was an orchestral musician 100 years ago. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I had to shift gears, was using my GI Bill benefits to figure out what I wanted to do. And I studied history and political philosophy, got a bachelor's and master's in that, and then made another shift and went into peer support. And I found through collaborating with a lot of folks across New York State in the Dwyer program, the effectiveness of peer support, how important it is, and that it really takes a particular type of veteran, because many of us are service oriented. We really want to help, but it takes a particular skill set to be effective. And I think this is something that I think should be replicated across all 50 states. Probably not run by the federal government. I would say the states understand what works best. Ward and I have talked about this a little bit before. So thank you for having me. And I'm not sure who's going to go next. I'll mute myself.
I'll jump in. Thank you. I appreciate this. And my name's Tim Scott. I served in, I joined the active duty Army infantry as an infantry scout at the age of 17. And so since then, a long journey up to now, I became a clinical social worker and also I'm now a full-time professor of social work. And yeah, there's a lot to say about this. And you're not asking questions. We're doing introductions now, so I'll wait until we get into that. And I just do want you, Aynisa, I got to say, is there? We got two jarheads in the room, right? You were saying a lot of big words and using a lot of big concepts. So I'm hoping you have, someone in a sixth grade level interpreting all that to them as we're going along here. That's the intro.
Brought some crayons along to keep me calm.
Thank you. Yes.
All right. Dylan, you're unmuted. Did you want to say something?
Do I have to?
I mean, you can.
You're on the panel. Say something.
All right. So my name is Dylan Damboise. I'm a Marine veteran. My likes include tabletop games. My dislikes include introducing myself to large groups of people. But I have a very personal connection with my local veteran community purely because it really kind of was the thing that helped me out of a rut. Because when I transitioned out of the military, I got to come home, go back to a room I had not been in for over like 4 years of my life. and I realized, wow, I have pretty much no friends that I have seen recently. My family treats me like a stranger, a good stranger, someone that they're proud of. But I realized that I looked at them and they looked at me, and they're just like, you're not the same person. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And that was a very difficult transition for everyone all around. And I had no idea what I was doing for the longest time. And I was trying to push through school, trying to go through motions, jobs, anything that would be normal for an adult. I attempted and somewhat floundered at until I was introduced to the local veteran supporting communities through various organizations such as Duers and like what was it, American Legions. And that really helped. It helped really introduce me to the fact that, oh, I'm not the only one going through this, and it reminded me that there's an entire community of people like me. And all of a sudden, I was like, okay, then I'm not alone in this conceptual struggle, and it made me want to be better not only for myself but for my community.
Aynisa,
Yes.
can I impromptu join the panel? Because it seems like Mikki may not be able to step in, and we were
Sure.
trying to get a female veteran.
Yeah, of course. Jump in. Do I have to do anything or?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, yeah, so everyone was gonna if she jumps in, I'll jump out. You were gonna get like a personal role model of mine, an army vet who is like a wonderful person and author, and but it's like that meme, we want this, we have this at home, and then it's like the rip-off Bergen Pin version. So I will fill in with her until she comes. My name is Melanie Corinne. I'm a Marine veteran, so there are 3 Marines on this panel. You all would have been outnumbered with 1, but now there are 3. That's it. It's over. Tim's like, try me. So
We need one
I
more for our team.
I'm a Marine Corps vet. I was an Arabic linguist. I did intelligence work. I have my degree in creative writing. I'm a writer. I have interned in the Blue Bloods writers room. I have been through some veteran screenwriting fellowships, and I'm currently a moderator for the Tumblr blog Writing with Color, which helps people, helps writers and creatives learn how to write BIPOC community members with like mindful representation. So I love storytelling, and I was the Dwyer Project coordinator for Suffolk County for a while, doing veteran peer support. Now I help at the state level. And I've started my own business where I do contracting and support veteran advocacy and artists mostly. So a lot of weird stuff, but I just wanted to desperately make sure there was no lack of female veterans on this panel, because as you guys all know, they are the biggest growing demographic of veterans.
All right. So I'm gonna kick it off with like kind of just what are the most significant gaps that you see in services for veterans, and or where do you want to see the most improvement?
Ooh, I got a lot of feelings on this one. So I look at this a little bit from like a logistical point of view, and I'm like, what is the thing that can tangibly help the most veterans who are most in need? And when I look at that, I see all of these federal programs. I'm just like, why aren't veterans using all of these federal programs? Because like half of these federal programs did not exist in the past 25 years, or were not as obtainable or as useful as in the past 25 years. The system has been constantly changing and evolving to the point where I still find Vietnam vets are like, what do you mean I can get paid for my PTSD? I'm just like, sir, where have you been? What have they done to you?
Dylan, you should tell them what you do for a living so you establish like.
Oh, yes. I help veterans get their VA benefits through various means. I also help families of veterans receive their benefits through survivors or aid and attendance and things like that for a law firm. And because of that, I've gotten very adept at looking at the system, and I like breaking down problems. It's one of my many favorite things, and I realized, wow, there's a lot of problems to break down here when you look at the things, because the federal services have all of these wonderful, useful tools. The issue is nobody can seem to reach them. Either they don't know about them, or there's actual gaps in service, like actually getting to the VA hospital, or getting someone on the phone who can help you, or various things like that. Tim, if you were talking, I unfortunately can't hear you.
I was just going to agree with Dylan that I don't know if there's a lack of services, as there's a problem with connectivity, and that's the kind of challenge I've seen a lot of fellow veterans struggle with coming home. And like Dylan said, there's great capacity, but we're not getting there in terms of like the logistics, getting people where the services are. I got inspired and started a company that brings services right into people's homes. There's a kind of a going to ground concept that a lot of veterans on occasion struggle with. To go to ground means you just sort of disappeared into the woods or into your house or within your family. And it's been kind of a tragedy to see a lot of veterans just sort of isolate themselves despite this huge number of services and a lot of energy of people that want to help them. And I don't know if there's a quick solution, but if that's going to be where this goes a little bit, there's been some terrific programming around collegiality, like the Wounded Warrior camaraderie concept, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a powerful, well-funded nationwide program, sort of connecting veterans to each other, but completely tricking them by having them in the woods doing fun, crazy things, kayaking, driving four-wheelers over sand dunes and being stupid. As long as there's no drinking or drugs and they have a good time, you wind up making these terrific friends within these systems that are actually designed to be connected and very much clinical. It just doesn't look like it on the surface.
So if I could just piggyback on what Ward was saying, and because I had an opportunity to meet with someone from DOD about a month ago, and I'm sure that you guys probably went through a similar TAMPS class as we're being processed out, where it was essentially 2 days. They throw a whole bunch of uninspired information at you. The person presenting is really like, oh, yeah, whatever. And everybody's kind of looking at the clock saying, is this over yet? I want to get out of here. The DOD has made a radical transformation of their TAMPS class now. And they start speaking with the active duty service member 1 year out. So 365 days from their EAS, they say, okay, hey, you're going to start taking examinations to see how prepared you are mentally, financially for getting out of the service. And depending on the way you score, there's 3 tiers. I think if they said if you score in the tier 3, you know what you're going to do, you're financially set, you've got the next steps planned and you're ready to get out. Whereas if you go to tier 1, you are mandated to take a number of courses on the way out. So it really is preparing these folks. And the presenter from the DOD actually said, we've had a number of active duty service members say, financially, I'm not prepared to get out. So I have to re-enlist or, extend their time in service to better prepare, which is huge. So I think DOD is recognizing like, hey, these TAMPS class that we were offered, I got out in 2004. I had no idea. You get out and there's so much out there. You're not exposed to much. And you have a difficult time reacclimating, not only, socially, because you're different. It changes you. And what you went as you entered the service, a lot of folks, recognize like, oh, hey, good to see you. You're not that person anymore. Not to say that it's Jekyll and Hyde, but, there's different varying levels of trauma that pretty much everyone's exposed to. And depending on who you are when you go in, because, I've always said this, and I've said this at a number of panels, that, we all know one person who really has a difficult time with that cup of spilled milk on the table, and it's an absolute tragedy. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where, the house is burning down around them. They're like, we might want to head towards the exit, and they casually just, respond to all this. So those folks, that whole spectrum of human being enters the military service and the different branches. We would say that the Air Force is a completely different experience than the Marine Corps. And I think some of these used car salesmen that get folks into the military, they're known as recruiters. They don't necessarily prepare these folks mentally, sometimes physically. I think we all went through that. I saw those folks at Parris Island being like, man, did you do any running before you joined? And they go to the PCP, right, the pork chop platoon, and they can't do any pull-ups, for about a month or so. So which means that they're on Parris Island for 6 months, and that's awful, and then they get out processed. So there's all sorts of different experiences and have profoundly different effects depending on the individual. So DoD now is recognizing, like, hey, we have to address this because I'm certainly not a licensed clinician, but I see that the suicide that will really the root of this that we're trying to get to is a manifestation of despair. And if these folks are feeling like I just can't get out of my own way, I'm feeling like there's no hope, then they'll turn to that ultimate resolution, that permanent solution to a temporary problem, and that seems like the best course of action. So then, I think us as folks that have the experience and the desire to help our fellow veterans, we really have to embrace that opportunity to help these folks. Because like Dylan said, many Vietnam veterans have such an antipathy towards anything when it comes to VA services. They're in the dark for a long time, and they don't realize that a lot of these institutions and processes have evolved significantly since the 1970s, and they're missing opportunities to significantly enhance the quality of their life simply because they're stuck in that mindset, like, well, they're going to call me a baby killer or spit on me or whatever, and they're like, nah, it's not like that anymore. And I think it truly takes another veteran, a VA rep, they're going to be like, hey, get away from me, and I'm armed, just so you know. So whereas another veteran, when they're coming up, like, hey, let's go out to lunch. Hey, let's go to this hiking event. We got a hunting event, whatever it is, to get them out of that mindset that no one's willing to help, and really, really taking a step towards dramatically improving the quality of their life.
Yeah, I agree with everything that my comrades have said so far, and then to add to that, there's so many layers to this, and obviously economic stability is foundational for everyone, and that is hard to achieve increasingly for most Americans anyway, let alone if you're struggling like veterans do, the unique struggle that veterans have. And then there's I think when it comes to the idea of what's treatment, what is normal or considered to be the preferred treatment that comes starting with the ideology from the DSM, and as paired to billing, right, and insurance companies and obviously other, through VAs and such. But still, this idea that the DSM, which basically reduces all of it, everyone who seeks services, veterans or non-veterans, to a cluster of symptoms, right? And it's dehumanizing. And I talk about dehumanization a lot, right, in the work I do, but it's including with veterans, and that as applied to veterans is that we become a cluster of symptoms, and that means that these so-called evidence-based, which just means practices that serve the ideology and are in line with the ideology of the DSM or the hegemony of the DSM, into basically we're going to apply cookie cutter types of treatments and interventions. That's a huge problem, and breaking out of that is hard because a lot of us clinicians are trained and brought up that way, and our interests, our status is all tied to it. But ultimately is that, and plus, the research on meta-analysis of the efficacy of treatment consistently shows that it's primarily related to the nature of our relationship with clients. Not in it, and you know, that no matter what interventions you use. So coming back, you know, and you know, having these, well, first humanizing veterans. We're not a monolith, right? And to bring in more, I believe, and what I've really found more helpful with veterans is more existential, humanistic, integrated, holistic type of processes for veterans to be established that you know, are going to, and of course, experiential through experiential based, person-centered, in community for approaches to coping and healing, and the idea of a new mission or new missions in life, because that's, we come out, you know, and you know, with purpose and meaning has been talked about here. So there's a crisis in the mental health establishment. It's, I believe that that's foundational. And then when you apply that to the specific needs of veterans who are ultimately deemed to be disposable or, you know, used as political pawns, but still disposable. So there's a lot of layers to this.
Tim?
Yeah.
Oh. I agree with what everyone said, and I think we can all agree, as we already did, just to reiterate that there are, I mean, billions of dollars of support, free healthcare. There's money, there's resources, there's programs available to veterans. It's not if the resources exist, it's bridging that gap, because the veterans that need them the most are the ones that it's the hardest to get them to. And that is, I think, what a lot of us here try to focus on with that community building, whether it's like Ward with his business trying to do, you know, I mean, he doesn't service only veterans, but whether he's trying to, you know, take away the mobility aspect, he will come, his business, they go to you, right? Like it's mental health, like they go, right? Whether it's Tim, who's deconstructing this idea of like literal, I mean, I'm a layman, I'm not a clinician, but like I hear that, I don't know if this is true, I hear that a lot of times clinicians need to diagnose in order to get paid, like insurance wise. So like the system or the healthcare system might force someone's hand to do something that is, you know, something, but like Tim's over here trying to be like, forget about all that, we're human beings, like human to human, let me try to service you as a human being. And then like, you know, Dylan and Jeremy over here being peers. And so, you know, and literally kneecap to kneecap, just being like, we're in the trenches too, you know? So we're all trying to build community in our own ways. And I think some focuses of building community have to be internal to the veteran community, intergenerational relationships between veterans. We need to increase them. Carl Rohde mentioned to me just now by text that there's no older veteran on this panel, and he's correct. And you know, that was an oversight. And it was a great catch. Because one thing that has been so formative to my community building is learning from the Vietnam vets, because nobody builds community like them. They had, I mean, back in the day, I've said it before, 18% of the country were veterans. Today it's 6%. Back in the day, like a much higher percentage of our elected officials were veterans. Today, you know, it's almost non-existent. And so, you know, all those Vietnam vets that came to back home, and these resources didn't exist, they relied on each other. They got there were no systems. They through peer support, through building community, finding community, they helped each other, and that was all they had. And so today, you know, I very much relate to a Johnny on the last panel when she says, you know, I don't self-identify. I'm a writer, I'm an artist. I identify with everyone on this panel as a fellow veteran, but, you know, maybe Jeremy as a musician is the one that interest-based, you know, maybe I have the most in common with, because we're both music, like he's a musician, I'm an artist, right? So it's, you know, younger veterans are building community around hobbies and interests, whereas like the older veterans had these life-shaking experiences where they built community around the veteran identity. And both those things are okay. And both those things, like both communities have different needs and different experiences, but I think it's kind of hard to integrate them, but when you can, you learn a ton in both directions. And it's like it's like communion. It's like the most special thing. And I will praise all of like the older veteran committee members, because I think we'd be lost without them, without their guidance, without their expertise. And when a lot of people have been asking in the comments about the thank you for your service, right? For someone, me and Dylan's age, a little younger, and like I won't speak to Ward, Jeremy, or Tim, because like I don't know what your service, like I don't know the ins and outs of your service experience, but I'm not a combat vet. I did anti-ISIS work from home, from the office, from in garrison, where I was physically safe the whole time we did that work. I don't know what it's like to have my life shaken by that. So I acknowledge that like there are different community building strategies for different veterans, and it really upsets me every time I see a Korean War vet, a Vietnam vet, a World War II vet struggling to navigate paperwork, the VA, to get, finite help, finances, emergent needs help, right? Benefits, healthcare. And the bureaucracy that kind of bars entry is hard for them to navigate, especially as they get older. And it's really like, this could just be a VA hate panel. It doesn't have to be. I'm just saying, the VA does amazing things. It is the best and the worst. Yeah. Sorry, I'm talking too much. I just
No.
with the older veterans, that intergenerational community for me is really important.
That makes a lot of sense, specifically on the like idea of intergenerational connectedness, because I really didn't know how much problems there were in the veterans community until I talked to older veterans that just didn't know any better about the things they had access to. Like veterans who genuinely like have serious problems that are service connected, and I'm just like, I can help you. I'm in the process of helping a lot of them, but it's absolutely ridiculous. But to talk a little bit about what Tim said about how veterans tend to get labeled as a pile or a list of symptoms.
It's the DSM cluster of symptoms, how it works, but yeah, but also just we're pathologized, and yeah, just by the fact that we're veterans, right? Based on many
problematically defined. It's all the problem rather than the resiliencies or the strengths. It's the nature of the DSM-5.
Yeah, the strengths-based approach. Yeah.
So where that is like a gigantic probably problem on more the clinician side of things. Ironically enough, I view a different set of symptoms. I view it more as the logistics the community faces. Older generations does not know how to obtain like passage to their benefits. They don't, and many people won't take the time to hold their hand and walk them through that.
But can we caveat and say that's not because of their age or an ineptitude, but because the VA has made so many recent changes, it's almost impossible for someone to keep up with the new program systemic changes. And so like, in all fairness, yes and no. It depends on the veteran. It may not even be an idea of ineptitude, but genuinely, some people leave the military more broken than others, and age is kinder to some people than it is with others. So genuinely, it's not a matter of talking down to them. It's just a matter of like, oh, you actually have memory problems. So paperwork and keeping up with things is going to be harder for you now. That's not them being inept. That's just the medical fact that they've been put into, and they actually need help to navigate those things now in their older years. Or genuinely, if they don't know a system has changed to help them, how are they supposed to know to use it?
Yeah, the other part that exacerbates it is the increasing use of technology to access a lot of this stuff in the VA. You'd be surprised. I mean, and now again, up here it's a little different. There's a lot of folks who don't have internet. So for them to file a claim themselves, which is kind of crazy anyway, but to do that themselves or to check up on a claim, some of them don't have smartphones. There's no internet. If they have a computer, they don't have access. They just don't know how to navigate this stuff. So there's what do we call it? I guess a knowledge deficit. It's not ineptitude. It's just they're like these technological changes are happening so fast that it decreases their ability to get involved with a lot of this stuff. And as a matter of fact, when I fill out my monthly Dwyer reports, we're still saying like, communication is a serious issue. That's why we have to be on the ground so much. Now, I think in urban areas, it's a little bit less so. I think folks are quite savvy, but up here it's a problem. And ironically, just to kind of piggyback on what Mel was saying, ironically, the largest group of veterans, a generation that participates in a lot of our events, because that's what we do. We use our events that we sponsor as a means to triage our veterans, where we're just kind of listening to what they're saying, being like, oh, it sounds like you need a mechanic, or you sounds like you need a dentist, or whatever. We kind of, take notes and then figure out the best way to help. The number of Vietnam veterans that participate in our events, it's the largest group. So the group that we're having the hardest time reaching, believe it or not, is the younger veterans, the ones that are just coming out.
You know what I found the other day, Jeremy, which might amuse you. I was like, where are all the younger vets at? And I was minding my own business doing young people things on like Discord and TikTok. And I found a Discord. So Discord is like AOL chat, but like modern for video gamers. And it's a place where a lot of young people just do like, basically they're just using the internet to text each other. It's kind of like for anyone that, it's a social media, but all right. So I found a Discord server, something about regiment, and it was a military only server. It has 35,000 young veterans on it that play video games with each other. That's the whole thing, is just connecting people, 35,000 young vets. And yeah, look it up, Jeremy. Regiment.
Yeah, no, I want you to text it to me because I won't do it.
All right, we'll continue offline. But what I'm saying, if you're looking for younger veterans in my area and you want to see them in a big group, there's a hockey group that will play hockey. It's like they get 60 veterans under like 50 together to play hockey. Anyone can come, older veterans can come, but these young vets want to be spending their time doing physical things, right? Or doing video games. It's just different spaces, and we have to learn to look for them, because these people on regiment, these fellow vets that are chatting, some of the testimonials are, I was lonely, I didn't want to leave my house, but I found my community online with fellow vets, and it stopped me from wanting to hurt myself. And that's repetitive. And then even for like me, just again, not trying to diverge terribly, but as a Latina woman, like, community for me sometimes looks different. Like, it's very hard for me to find, I would love to have like, other female Latina mentors. It's not easy to find people to be in community with that aren't just based on the veteran experience. For the 2 years that I did my Dwyer outreach, we did not have a Spanish language. Yeah, I'm one of the 20 million US based Latinos that does not speak Spanish. The other 40 million, they do. So yeah, I'm part of that 1/3. But not for lack of trying. I'm just bad at it.
Well, actually, it's funny you say that, Mel, because I'd spoken with a number of parents of veterans, and they said, I'm worried. They said that their child, combat veteran, whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq, they said they sit in the basement, they were enrolled in school, but they have since withdrawn, and they play Call of Duty all day. So one of the things we did, and I think I might have said this at one point, we're having a quarterly Call of Duty tournament, 1v1. And we're giving out like a $500 gift card if you come in first place. And this, because we've got one coming up March 22nd. If anybody wants to follow us, the Adirondack Peer-to-Peer on Facebook, what we've done is we've also instituted like a little Wii section on the college campus. So again, what we're trying to do is break down any barrier. So if a veteran was like, well, I would have participated, but I would have had to bring my kids. Well, we've got a Wii station set up. So you can go bring your kids, and there'll be a number of other kids over there doing, Wii sports or whatever they're going to do. And we're also going to have a section for older veterans who want to play board games. And we provide food. So we had 6 register for the first one, which was a couple weeks before Christmas. Very strong feedback. Those same 6 have registered for the one we're having in March. And we have a number of more registrants. So
yeah. Can I just
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, someone was asking, Kayla was asking if it was only in New York. I don't know if she was talking about you. I'm gonna post that regiment thing in the chat. I just did that link. I don't know if this is a good organization. I'm not sharing it because I vetted it and I approve. I'm sharing it because it is something that's outside the box and is showing a massive amount of veterans in a
At the very
different
least, it
space.
can be a useful model that might
Yeah,
be used to
exactly.
help
So
people
sometimes it
move.
helps to explore. So that is there. Jeremy, you should drop your link for that. And then Nell, can you drop the link to the listserv, the community listserv? Because Mary Jo just reached out to me, and that's a great point too, is that this is all about collaboration. Community building is about collaboration. And to Jeremy's point, like he's always inviting people to come to these spaces, and like different veterans will vibe and be called to different things. Horse therapy is like transformational, life-saving for some veterans.
Why do we always come
Yeah,
back to this?
I'm not a horse person. I'm terrified. They're like 2,000 pounds of straight muscle. That could kill me. That could kill me. So what I'm saying is like it doesn't have to work for you. It just has to work for the veteran. So horse therapy, art therapy, like classical therapy, sitting and talking, right? Somatic stuff. Ward hasn't done it yet, but I'm waiting for him to talk about touching grass and being in green spaces, because that is integral to like people's mental health.
Yeah, it's a good segue, Melanie. I mean, one of the questions I had was just that, like what worked for you? What have you seen work for others? Just to raise that conversation for our attendees so they hear some of these like, maybe more abstract methods and services. So if they are working with a veteran, they can make the proper recommendations.
Well, I can't speak for Tim, but I think he and I are so proud of the Marines that are just doing such a good job right now. They're very grown up. And in case those of you who don't know, some of the bands.
Don't you worry, I'll disappoint you in a moment.
Somebody said, someone on the panel said, I'm just a dumb Marine, but blah, blah, blah. I said, you don't have to say dumb. So how it works, if you're not, military connected, the Army is the best, and then the Marines, and then there's the other ones. So it's cool to kind of know that from a basic form. But
we don't even need to respond. We don't need to respond to you guys. We're so arrogant that we can sit here and not say anything and just know in our hearts that we're bad.
Yeah, be careful. I'm gonna start throwing around code pretty quickly, okay?
Focus. So probably one way to wrap up the VA, you can never wrap up the VA conversation, but I think of the VA, maybe people might agree it's comprehensive but formulaic, in that it's a massive health system, and my own experience with it has been awesome. Not everyone can say that, and I can respect it, but it is extremely formulaic. And referencing what Melanie said about the Vietnam vets, a bunch of them came back in the 70s and they're like, this is fucked up. It's terrible, and it was a really bad time. And they went to Congress and created their own separate system called the vet centers. And the vet centers popped up in every single city in America, and they were community based and mental health driven. So amazing to be part of that in some years back. And guess what happened? The VA got involved in it. They started taking it over, and the whole thing became VA-ish, which is sort of a tragedy. But that's another story. But if I think the VA is a good starting point, at least for most people, and it is deeply comprehensive. It's more medically driven in my experience, and a little less community based. But there's just so much out there to connect to. But Melanie referenced grass. So the thing about, I think most people, particularly veterans that have been in combat or that have gone through the training and certainly done the sort of military-ish aspect of it, you wind up in the woods. You're hanging out with a bunch of people that are, for the most part, looking out for each other. And when you go, face the enemy, you really are there for each other. And if you can bring veterans together in a way that's connected and outdoors, you almost always have really good outcomes. Almost always, because you're bringing back kind of arguably the better aspects of the combat experience. And that's why I think the Wounded Warrior model is really great. But honestly, since I've come home, I've just connected with a bunch of veterans, and we just do backpacking trips all the time. And it's particularly up in Jeremy's area. The Adirondacks is about the most beautiful part of New York State, especially with the high rises and the subways that go through all the little mountains. I mean, the reality is it's completely empty up there. There's these huge spaces where you can see stars, you don't hear or see people, and that's a special connectivity for a lot of vets. If I could just leave that at that note. But
Yeah, so if I could piggyback on what Ward's saying, we're doing the best we can to make connections with a number of non-VA resources, simply because we feel that veterans are more apt to take part in a support group that's run by licensed clinicians that are not affiliated with the VA. And what I'm finding also, because we have, I have connections with other Dwyer programs. One of the things that we did here, we started an MST support group run by licensed clinicians. That it's local, it's down the road. And it's geared towards women right now. We're going to integrate the men at some point with a different group, but we just wanted to go with the one that I think was the most urgent. So we buy dinner for the ladies twice a month, and the clinicians are saying now, because I just had a debriefing with them last week. We've done this for about 6 weeks, maybe 2 months now. Anyway, they said that it's going extremely well. The ladies are asking to attend more frequently. They want to bring other veterans in that they know have suffered through this stuff. So I heard that the Saratoga peer-to-peer had tried a VA-run program, and it was telehealth. And I guess it went terribly. And I'm like, it makes sense, because you really need to be in person to be able to read the body language, to recognize, hey, when it's time to pivot. And via, Zoom, there's not much flexibility you have there. And I guess it went terribly. So again, so for MST, we've got attachments to equine therapy groups, forest bathing, hunting excursions, this type of stuff. All we're trying to surround the veteran community with opportunities to get out, experience different activities with other veterans, that they're going to make these connections, but it's going to, sometimes the progress is very slow sometimes. So we have to be patient. Also, we're not necessarily going to see folks jumping at these opportunities. You have to be persistent. You have to be patient. The communities will grow over time. And if you find after, a series of months, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But, the big thing is building the trust amongst the
Can I just jump in? I'm so sorry. Nell, can you pull Mikki in? Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Mikki, you didn't hear this, but I said you were my role model. So the fact that you're here if you have a little bit of time after the panel, maybe you want to stick around just to answer some Q&A. I'm so sorry. I will step out now. Guys, I'm so excited. I read Mikki's book in college, and it had a formative impact on me. And she has been really personally inspiring to my journey as an advocate. So I just wanted to invite her in.
Thanks for joining, Melanie. Hi, Mikki.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I woke up with a migraine at 6 a.m. and took a new migraine medication. Should have slept for 2 hours. I apparently slept for 5 more. I had no idea that was a possibility.
Well, welcome to the conversation, Mikki. And we jumped in talking about community building and resources and what's available and where the gaps are. And we're kind of talking now about services that have been effective, that are maybe outside the box, or things that we might not normally think of. So that's where we're at. But if you want to just jump in and quickly introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Mikki Kendall. I am a veteran Army, regular Army. My book is called Hood Feminism, and I think I can put that in the chat. Hold on. Oh wait, never mind. So I did it already. And it's ironic that this is the moment at which I come into the conversation, because technically my alternative therapy helped more than going to VA. I have a weird alternative therapy for myself. So I'm an MST person, and I have PTSD, and I did the therapy, did all the things. But the thing that worked for me of all things was fire twirling. You can't think about anything else while you're playing with fire. You can't have any other noise in your head. I know how this sounds. You set 2 sticks on fire with white gas. You work your routine. You do whatever you're doing with the fans, whatever. It's the quietest moment in your brain. I know that there are people right now who are going, wait, I know performers. Try flow arts. Just saying. I'm trying to convince people that we should get VA to sponsor this as well for vets who are not afraid of fire, because it could be really good for your brain. It's been amazing for me.
I've never heard of someone say mental health trial by fire quite so literally.
It's okay. Listen, I know that this is like a formally structured panel, but I want you to understand that many of the things that I think we think of in therapy at VA are sitting down, very still things. And in my experience, veterans are terrible at sitting down and just being still. It's not the thing we really learned how to do as kids. It's why the military appealed to us in the first place, except for snipers. Y'all are in a different category in many ways. And so physical changes sometimes can really work. I heard someone earlier mention equine therapy, and I think animals are great, but for some people, animals are not necessarily a thing, right? Some people can do not loud noises, but they really like the sparkly fire parts. You can also get light whips and things like that that have no fire involved, but they're still very, very physical things to take your body through. Because I think a lot of the programming that VA does is sort of centered 40, 50 years ago on men. I'll put it that way gently. I used to work at VA as an RVSR. Yes, Dylan.
I just have a quick question, because I want your opinion on this. I would like everyone's opinion on this one, because I think the VA is a wonderful resource in 2 categories, and singularly 2 categories. I'm sure they're probably better in other things, just not my personal experience. It's really good that they give them the ability to gain access to tangible medical needs and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the ability to give them to financial needs and benefits in the form of like compensation and other things. But outside of those 2 things, I think the VA really needs to not stop, but shouldn't be involved in, because at the end of the day, they are a government institution made to provide a particular service. They're not community driven, because there's no cookie cutter way to do community. It's easier to provide cookie cutter solutions to statistical problems that are more just based around like liability and needs than actual social connection. And I feel like a big issue that a lot of us are having is the fact that the VA is trying to be holistic, and they're not, and that's fine. We have to stop trying to make the VA holistic, because that's going to be like pulling teeth, and it's easier to empower state level or community driven programs, whether it's state or county. And I really feel like those things can take the forefront of it. But I would also like to point out, and I'm sure everyone's going to have their own viewpoint on this one, not all community programs are made equal. Because when we look over at Jeremy and how he runs his program, he's like a talk show host, because he brings in really great things and he goes, and then there's more. And like the list doesn't stop of all of these really nice, wonderful, inclusive things. He's like, bring the family, bring the kids, bring your grandpa, it'll all work out. And he thinks very forward on it all.
See, I'm trying to figure out how to pull the Jedi mind trick on the VA to have them start supporting me, as opposed to because now they are making referrals to me, which I think is a big win. Because some of these folks, I think their heart is in the right place, or they're just trying to get promoted or whatever, but they're just extremely ineffective, and perhaps do more harm than good. Some of them belong like working at the DMV or something like that. It's it's really, really sad because they're just checking a box. But again, kind of reinforcing what Dylan had said, the community-based stuff, we're able to meet these folks face to face and really get an idea of what's going on. The home visits are sometimes some of the worst because the face that someone puts on at an event it doesn't necessarily reflect what they're living in, and one of the connections I'm making with the state is folks that do that have grants for home repairs, especially for veterans. I've done a couple of home visits where, like, you know, you don't want to betray how you're feeling on the inside because you don't want to insult anyone, but you're like, what the hell? How did it get to this? How are you living in this? This place should be condemned. So, and you find, especially with some of our Vietnam veterans, their willingness to just kind of suffer through stuff is very sad. So I think, you know, us being the community-based stuff, being on the ground, you know, just paying a visit to someone, and that's why we've kind of opened up. We just were approved to purchase 2 vehicles for the program, so we can kind of, it's because the folks that ran it before I didn't spend one dime from fiscal year 2022, and the state was getting ready to take the money back. So we were like, no, please, let us buy a couple of vehicles. So now, where there's gaps in transportation services for transporting veterans to medical appointments, we jump on the opportunity to just do a home visit, take them out to lunch, that type of stuff, and kind of see where they're at. And it's not us snooping, it's us trying to help. And I think they understand, like, oh, hey, you know, I know of a particular organization that, you know, I can help you fill out the grant paperwork, and you can get some money to install that ramp on your house, so you have an easier time getting in and out. That type
Jeremy,
of stuff.
can I pause you for 1 second?
Of course,
That's absolutely amazing. And there's only one reason why I want to pause that. That's exactly the sort of community that is the exact thing that we want. But I think that's the sort of community that we would say the VA should be bankrolling more community-driven things, and the federal should be bankrolling more things for the state to help them deal with stuff. But as much as I just want to champion that to the high heavens, because I genuinely do, I've also seen the other end of the spectrum. And I feel like until we deal with the worst parts of how community like organizations can abuse veterans, we cannot ask the federal government to start picking up the check. And I'm sure you have feelings on this, Mikki, or anyone else.
Okay, so I was in a VSR. I was a Veteran Services Rep doing compensation and pension for a while, and I left VA because at a certain point, I get what you're saying about it feeling like it's the DMV, but I have to say that the culture internally for VA is toxic in other very exciting, unsurprising ways. It was the worst.
Only veterans are just like, and you'll be abused in this way.
Like, you will be abused as an employee of VA also as well in many cases. The thing that I think is part of this is that we're not tying together. I saw someone say, you know, what about state mental health services? And this is one of those things where the state you're in completely dictates whether or not there are mental health services. So we're going to see some places have really great things for vets to tie into, really great state level benefits. I think we need to be thinking a little bit smaller and more about, like, say, the county level. Because when you really start getting down to it, if you live, I'm going to use Illinois as an example because I'm from Chicago. If you live in Illinois, we are one of the bigger states landmass wise. Almost everyone in the state of Illinois lives in Cook County or the surrounding counties. Almost 3/4, I think it is at this point, of the Illinois population lives at the northern half of the state. And a lot of times people will talk about that in terms of voting patterns, that, well, what about the rest of, you know, Illinois? Not only can land not vote, land cannot provide good, robust services, right? And so a VA in Chicago Jesse Brown has access to tons of things at the county level. At the state level, though, the state is busy with all of those other counties. We have more than 100 in which there are no major cities. There's no major anything, but they have a population of 2,000 or 3,000 or whatever. And yes, those are rural counties, but you still got to provide services to people in those counties. And many times they're veterans, because Illinois is one of the states where if you join from here as a veteran, you get 4 years of college tuition free.
Maybe Mikki and Jeremy should join a rural veterans panel talking about those specific issues. In the chat, in your after action, let us know if that's a thing you guys are interested in.
But just kind of to touch up on things like this, I have seen veterans in the veterans community commodify other veterans, and it's kind of worrying. And I'm sure this is something that anyone who's worked in the community has probably seen on some level, where they're going to go, we're going to have a space where veterans meet up. And then they're going to meet up there and they're going to do nothing. Like, they don't even bother throwing a pizza party or something. It's not community. It's a check in the box to say, we serve X demographic of veterans, give us funding. And they are literally seeking to spend the least amount of money and get the maximum amount of profit. And that profitization of veterans in needs is ultimately problematic, because they're not seeking to solve problems. They're seeking to say that we're here to witness your problems and maybe let you talk about it, but really not do much. And even when you look at things like equine therapy and some things, those are organizations that are doing a tangible, good thing, but many people don't have access to. And the organizations that do give them access is great. But those organizations that are connecting them to that one service are reaping the majority of the profits of said service, even though they are not the ones responsible for helping the veteran most. And I think we need a more proactive approach in finding and making better organizations that are better at being proactive in helping veterans in terms of filling gaps in service.
Yeah, I think, Dylan, part of that issue is, and what we're finding here, I think it's all about documentation, making sure, because I know folks can fudge numbers, but I invite just about every last politician in my vicinity to come and attend our events. And I don't want them to make a big deal of it, because they'll want to shake hands and, do the politician. But but the reality is if they show up and they see how effective we are at really helping the veteran community and the improvement of their lives and that type of stuff, then you say, okay, well, what is it we're doing right? And, to be honest, it's about leadership. You got to have the right people in the right place, doing the right things. A lot of folks will come out and say, well, yeah, I want to help veterans. But, like Dylan alluded to, it's very lucrative for some folks. And if your heart's not in the right place, that's why I'm such a proponent of the peer aspect of it. As a matter of fact, Ward and I had talked at one point, because I just spoke with the local state senator up here. And I said, I think that the New York State should consider bringing in a grant program for veterans who want to study social work, who want to go into counseling. Because the GI Bill will get you so far. However, when those funds run out, there's folks that veterans want to help, but they don't have the funds to go on and get the right certifications and degrees. So they thought it was a great idea. We'll see if it comes to fruition, but I think it's a worthwhile study. And if we keep adequate data, if we put out on our social media outlets videos, obviously you have to ask for permission and that type of jazz. But if we demonstrate, like, hey, not only this a good time, use those social media outlets to attract more veterans, but we get the message out to the people that should be listening, that are paying attention, how effective you can be if it's run properly.
I think one of the barriers to creating a good organization is, for a lot of people, how do you start, right? How do you can know social workers, you can be able to pull people in together, but then VA's paperwork, and I say this, like I said, as a former VA employee, it's like jumping through hoops backwards. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to VA for your benefits. I absolutely think every veteran should immediately, individually go. But in terms of becoming a partner organization, I know this is a conversation I've had with several people in the Chicago area. It is not, and it may be our VA, it is not easy if you are not already a partner organization to start a productive partner organization, even if all you want to do is direct care and services. You have a lot of people in Chicago area working with veterans who have been incarcerated, who are essentially running headfirst at a wall trying to get VA to step in, because VA does not necessarily think that they have any duty of care. And I get it. Dishonorable discharge happened. All of these things happen. But a lot of times that person was a different person before they served. And their experiences are why we are where we are now. And so
Yeah,
we're trying to get that
Yeah,
connection.
Mick, also, I'm sure we could all speak to this. The dishonorable discharge. You know, I've run into a number of veterans when they explained the circumstances as to why they were, the bad conduct or OTH or whatever. Their command hung them out to dry. You know, they'd come back from Iraq, and had seen things and done things, and they weren't given the right type of care, and literally thrown to the wolves when they got back. And then, they had post-traumatic stress disorder that wasn't diagnosed. They had traumatic brain injury that wasn't diagnosed. And then they wind up getting arrested by civilian law enforcement, and the command hangs them out to dry. So not only they wind up going to jail, they come back, go to the brig, and then they're a broken person. And then they've got this discharge that's inhibiting them from getting a quality job, being accepted to good education programs. So these are the types of things that when we identify them, they're like, we might want to work on getting that rate of discharge changed, gather enough evidence, and then put forward like an opportunity for them to at least get healthcare and mental health services through the VA, even if DOD might not reconsider the discharge.
I think that's a really wonderful and poignant way of putting it, and that's a very great way of handling things. And I would like to point out that this brings up a thing about filling those gaps in service. And ironically enough, there are things that do sort of fill those gaps in service naturally, between attempting to get discharge upgrades and the Hofstra Law Clinic, as well as state level agencies and things like that, who try and push for discharge upgrades and helping people work through their problems and obtain their benefits, even with OTH and other things. And there's a term that it's called a cottage industry. And that's when there is a gap in some form of service, a smaller niche service gets born within it. I believe Ward specifically falls into that category of realizing that there's a particular gap. And so he created an industry in which serves the community, trying to get in between that gap.
It's the cottage cheese of cottage cheese industry, Dylan. Thank you. Can I segue into something that might be a great avenue into health, if that's okay? Solution-focused therapist for many years, looking at strengths and resiliencies rather than the deficit model as a traditional mode. And I was shocked to find out there's an incredible amount of resources and funding for veterans to get into businesses. And I didn't know much about it, being an entrepreneur, but there's just training assets, honestly, through the SBA that are funded partly through the VA, as well as loans that you can get called the Patriot loans, also through such systems. And I don't know if you know, a huge amount, 9% of entrepreneurs in America are veterans. A huge number of companies were started by veterans, like Nike, Enterprise, GoDaddy, FedEx. These are all veterans that started them, kind of came out of combat and said, there's something we could do a little bit better. For example, World War II pilot said, you could actually just rent cars to people right at airports where they could then drive around and go use them and then leave them back at the airport. And that idea was created by a veteran. Same thing with our concept of mobile counseling. It's all over New York State now, but it was created by a veteran 9 years ago, just as an innovative way to connect people immediately to mental health services. So earlier, Tim was saying one of the great resiliencies to mental health challenges is finances. And generally speaking, in my opinion as a therapist, if somebody's really busy doing something productive, meaningful, and of great interest to them, they're not dealing with mental health concerns. They're not generally struggling the way someone who is maybe bored or marginalized or ostracized. And when you're doing something meaningful, you're generally feeling, pretty terrific, and your family benefits and you benefit, and your future benefits, and thus the outcomes. So the entrepreneur program and approach is much more than just something you could do if it interests you. I would steer a lot of veterans that you might be working with, clinicians, toward that potential, and say, if you got a dream of a business or an idea of something, there's actually all these resources that will help you not just achieve it, but support it, fund it, train on it, and support it later on when it needs to grow. On that note,
So
thanks for listening.
in question and curiosity of funds, just to literally jump off of that, is I feel like we've talked a lot about like different avenues of approach, and we focused a lot on community. And I think that's because community is a gigantic part of this. But let's talk about things that veterans need. Veterans need, besides community, they need security, they need shelter, they need means. And a thing that I find shocking is that so many of the veterans in our community lack these things. And there's, I don't want to say an easy way, but there's an avenue for them to obtain this. And the crazy thing is, not many of them know how to navigate it. Either you're in an older generation that doesn't know how to handle apps or particular following ups of paperwork and things like that. Genuinely, there are ways, college industry and otherwise, that can handle this. And this is a huge part of it, is where we just need someone to help a veteran say, what are your problems? Like, what did the military cause? And you can help them either get income, or you can help them get VA disability. And someone who is, let's say, homeless in the worst possible situation, if I can get them 50% service connected, they receive $1,054 a month. That is $1,054 a month they didn't have, and they know they're going to get $1,054 a month from that point thereon. That is a huge difference, in my opinion, in what can affect their quality of life and their trajectory. Because now, yes, it's desperate, but now you have at least something in form of security that you can rely on. And I really think we, as veteran peers and people who wish to seek and help veterans, need to focus on, well, what is actually going to give them the sense of security? Because I feel like it is so difficult to focus on helping yourself when you are in crisis. And there is emotional crisis, there is mental crisis, but then there is actual financial crisis that can go into multiple things.
I mean, as I've said before, I think everyone should always, as the first thing they do when they get back, that the day one start of the day is going to do online to do all of your applying for VA, getting your compensation and physical set up. Getting, if you are in one of the states, there's state funds for school, get those state funds so you can go to school. If it's voc rehab, you have to go through, and those are some hoops, but you can go through voc rehab too. But getting everything together, day one, week one, whatever, yes. Financially though, the backlog inside VA and making decisions on those rates and the rest of it means I always tell people, yes, you should apply. And then the second thing you should do is start looking for a job. And I know that is a lot to say, but it can take as long as 2 years in terms of backlog for that paperwork to be processed. Every time the law changes in Congress, or another lawsuit is won, this is not knocking the lawsuits, file your lawsuits, standards change, new training rotates in. Quiet is kept, the actual process for compensation and pension doesn't actually make any sense across time, right? And so that paperwork backlog can sometimes get very high depending upon which VA you are going through. The system may have improved by now, but last time I was involved, it was a lot of hurry up and wait. You're in the military, you remember that feeling. It's not changing at VA.
6 to 10 months for initial claims. If you add an appeal onto that, at least another 9 months. And if you're trying to go before a veteran court judge, which is the most appreciative thing, it takes about 2 years on top of whatever your initial claim was.
Yep.
And Dylan and Mikki, I think we need to make sure that we're telling our veterans this, because many of them put all their eggs into that basket, that it's going to solve all their issues, and they become so anxious. It's almost like buying a lottery ticket and expecting to win, but not getting the results for 9-10 months. And they call you and they're like, well, I haven't heard anything back yet. And you're like, yes, it's going to take some time. We have to do some things while we're waiting. We can't just sit back, because what if the decision comes back and you were expecting 100% and you get 30%? In the meantime, these folks are, going hungry, or, bills aren't getting paid. So part of that the approach we've taken is getting veterans to understand what services and what opportunities do they have access to in the meantime. Okay. Can we get them hooked up with a trade school or, job placement? The other part too is I think a number of veterans don't really have a solid grasp on who they are. I'm working with one Marine veteran right now, as a matter of fact, who considers himself to be quite an intellectual and wants to go into counseling and all this stuff. And we're having a hard time because he's got diarrhea of the mouth, and he says like the worst things at the worst time in front of a whole lot of people. And I'm like, you got to understand that you're constantly auditioning for a job, no matter where you're at, in what's considered a safe space, and people are listening to the way you speak. And I'm like, you turn a lot of potential employers off. So, they have to kind of be retrained in society. So, those are two things that go hand in hand. Yes, there's a potential for a great outcome with your VA claim, but it's not going to happen overnight. You might not necessarily get what you want to hear. It might have to be appealed, which is, you're talking about almost a 2-year process now at that point. And in the meantime, you have to have gainful employment. We have to find whether it's a course of study or a meaningful career that's going to give them a sense of satisfaction and understanding where they're going to be a good fit, and it's going to, be very rewarding for them.
And one of the things I want to add here, I think there's a question for me in the chat and I can't answer it, but can I just drop my email in the chat? Can someone do that? Okay. But I think one of the things I want to add here is that the way in which we are currently approaching it, right? And I'm one of the veterans where I got out, I had great networks, I was able to find work. I started temping almost immediately, that kind of thing. And obviously now this is not a concern, is that we are not really thinking about the fact that many veterans are going in as 18-year-old kids who have never had any other job. They don't have any of the job skills those of us who are either working in the community with them or who have gone forth to do other things have. And we are looking at them and saying, okay, now you got to figure out how to land on your feet. And they may not be ready for the job that they want. They may, in fact, end up having to do retail or temping or whatever till they acquire those skills. And, being honest and upfront about that. Yes, you have been in the military, you have done X, Y, Z, and now this is a temporary job where you learn how to navigate in the civilian world. And I'm not necessarily saying they have to go work at McDonald's or whatever, but they're going to need to get a job doing some very basic things at first until they acquire some life skills. They've never paid for an apartment. Many of them are quite shocked when they find out what rent is because they lived on post the entire time they were in. I have a friend whose son was a Marine. He got out, all of that. And his first big shock was moving back to the town that they live in. And when he left, rent was, let's say, $480 for a 2-bedroom. Well, the town has had a boom. Town has grown up much, much bigger than it used to be. Rent now is about $1,200 a month for a 2-bedroom. And he kind of had that same thought. He was counting on somebody else, right, to help him navigate everything. And she's calling me and I'm explaining I'm working with him. But at some point I kind of had to say, because we had lots of jobs we didn't think we should have to take, you can apply, but you may not get the amount you expect to get. And getting that 70% or 80%, someone told you you were guaranteed to get at some point, that's not at all true. And when they are coming out at 25, because in many ways, being in the military suspends maturation. Yes, you learn how to do a lot of things, but life skills network in the civilian world, and even frankly in the military world, they don't have to learn how to do those things, right? Someone tells them what to do. They tell them where they can live. They get a list, or someone in housing helps them take care of those things. And I think we are expecting them to come out the same way we would expect a college grad to come out. And also, this is, as a parent of a now college grad, got to tell you, college is also not necessarily teaching every life skill, because my oldest is 24. And we're having to kind of parent an adult. And in many ways, I think what's happening with a lot of young veterans is that they were not being parented for a host of reasons. They join the military, a sergeant tells them what to do, or a cap tells them what to do. They get out, and now they have to know what to do. And when we say go to VA, VA is going to take their paperwork, but VA cannot provide everything. And I know that community is a big thing, but I also think, frankly, our community partnerships, voc rehab, et cetera, needs to be willing to honestly say, hey, listen, I know they told you that with these skills from the military, you'd be able to do X, Y, Z. Now let's talk about the actual criteria to do those jobs in the civilian world that the federal government never gave you, and how you can acquire them, and how we can establish something, right? And it's a transition. And I think a transitional program, this is sort of my pet potential future project, is a transitional program for veterans getting out to help them find housing and other things, because I am in a high cost of living area. So if they get out in Chicago, and when they left, they could work at their friend's garage or wherever and still afford a rent, they can no longer do that. Even if they get out and they do have a job to go back to, they cannot afford the major cities they're from. A VA check, if they get one, it will help. But you've got a lot of vets in New York City, LA, et cetera. It does not matter what they did in the military. It does not matter if they go get a bachelor's degree. There are people with master's degrees who cannot afford these cities. And then one of the things I want to do in between writing books and other things is create kind of a gap program, so that we can have a more realistic conversation about expectations, because I'm not sure what's happening on the other end, but someone is telling them that they will get out and everything will be okay. They will apply to VA and they think that check starts immediately.
There's no BAH in real life, is there, Mikki?
Not at all.
No.
For those don't know the ridiculous acronyms of the military, it's basic allowance for housing, and it's a supplement you get when you're active duty.
So
So,
another thing to kind of, I'm sorry to piggyback on
Jeremy,
that.
go ahead.
I'm seeing actually the transition for some folks after retiring, 20, 22 years, they expect a certain amount of respect. They understand the high level command decisions that they were making when they were in the service. And when they get out and they give their resume, now that's one thing that we've really taken initiative on, making sure we adapt their resume to a civilian workplace. However, some of these folks are not jumping at the 22-year master sergeant in the Marine Corps, and these guys are getting very frustrated. And just to really, I'm just affirming what Mikki said. You might have to start out at a job that not necessarily is beneath them, but it's like a starter job. And they're in a better position than many folks, because if they've done 20, 22 years, they've got a retirement. So they're not necessarily having to starve as much, but they're having to understand that, it's going to be a transition for them. Some employers, I think, are going to be a little bit reluctant to hire military, because there's that stigma that exists for folks who are like, oh, well, are they going to, they're going to do something wild and crazy while they're on the workplace? They don't necessarily understand. So you kind of have, not starting from zero, but maybe taking lower level management at a Lowe's or something like that. There's plenty of organizations that say, yes, we will hire veterans. However, you're going to have to work your way up the ladder. And for some veterans, that's a tough pill to swallow.
I have a question about that, Jeremy, if you don't mind, only because I've talked to people in certain like financial jobs that are higher end and things like that. And I talk to them about just like, like master sergeants and very high end level people. I ask them, it's like, are they always sure wins? Like, how does it work? And a lot of them actually are worried primarily because it's like you were talking about someone who's had a lot of power and authority for a significant amount of time within a very specific structure. And that doesn't really translate well into civilian work all the time. And they're like, and so we're not really sure what we're getting if they've directly gotten out. And it's difficult to assume how they're going to do things. Because if they're going to try and run it like they ran things in the military, that can be very catastrophic depending on where it is and may not gel well with just standard civilians. And some people transition really well. They're understanding that these people are not soldiers or veterans, so they're not going to be used to certain structures or capacities and things like that, and they transfer really well. Other ones don't, and so people are really hot and cold. So I think having that introduction program that you and Mikki were talking about, in order to like prove it's like I am socialized, I do have a concept of understanding, really does help kind of pad their resume into being able to push faster into higher level things because you've at least shown that yourself to be sociable.
Sure, because I think a lot of these civilian employers also understand. I mean, I think when you talk with folks out in the workforce, they're very frustrated with these younger employees. You can't treat them the way some of us who are a little older, especially having been in the military, you can't treat them the same way. So if they're like, oh man, I'm going to hire this 22-year Marine, is he going to blow up my workforce? Am I going to have 40% of my workforce quitting the day after he takes control? So for them it's a risk. Sure, they're going to have someone who shows up 30 minutes early to work and never calls in sick, but are they going to alienate a significant portion of my workforce? So for a lot of civilians who don't necessarily understand military personnel, can't look and understand the level of expertise on a military resume, there's probably some apprehension on their part. So that's where we again, I'm going to, reiterate what Mikki said, like, hey, you might have to take a job that's you might feel is a bit beneath you, but if you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to climb the ranks fast and you're going to get a quick recommendation. And then all of a sudden you're able to add that to your resume. Oh man, I only worked for them for a year, but I got promoted twice and they're giving me an exceptional recommendation for my next job. That's very powerful because it augments what you've already got built with your military resume.
Aynisa, you were going to say something earlier.
Yeah, thanks, Mikki. So we only have a few minutes left, and a few questions came in about like actual resources that you would recommend, being experts in this topic and in this field. Are there any that come to mind that you would recommend our attendees look into in supporting veterans and or their families?
So one of the things I always recommend people do, and this is actually even directly from VA, a lot of people know about compensation and pension, and then they know about getting medical care. VA has a lot of grants and in some cases loan types for renovation for your home. And one of the things I've noticed for a lot of veterans families is that, especially when you have someone, whether they're a Vietnam vet or even later, right, my era, Bosnia, if they struggle with things like hoarding, things like that, you need professional help. And that VA is not always going to be the place where you can get the help directly at VA, but you can definitely go to VA in terms of helping you find a partner organization or community care so that they can be getting the psychological help that you need while you're getting that home improvement grant to kind of get your veteran or your veteran's family back to a place where the housing is livable, since we talked about that earlier. I think a lot of people only know those two programs and don't know those other funds exist. You should also check at the state level because depending upon your state, sometimes your state has a lot of funds for veterans that for a host of reasons, they don't advertise well. I know Illinois is one of those states where I feel really great and lucky to be from here, but also as I was going through my own going to school process and the rest of it, it was like playing a treasure hunt game. I don't know if I can describe it, to figure out what benefits I was actually entitled to at the state level, separate from the federal level. So that would be the first two things. And then, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but check with your county or your city. One of the things about finding a job, especially with that veterans preference, lots of people know to go the federal route, but your county and your city may be more interested, and depending upon your skills in the military, you still qualify with it for the vet preference, but they may be a little bit more understanding. You have a higher likelihood. I worked for the county, Champaign County in Illinois at one point. It was almost all veterans because they had gone to college here, and one of the guys in HR was a vet. So that was what he really did. He hired vets, regardless of your MOS and whatever. He was trying to find a way to slot you in the city services. But almost nobody thinks to apply at the municipal level. Everyone says, oh, I guess I got to try and get a federal job at VA or Department of Labor or whatever. There's a lot of competition for those jobs. There's not a lot of competition at your state and federal, state and municipal level for civil service jobs in the same way.
Can I also just, I'm so sorry, this is an important resource. Can I also just add on to what Mikki's saying? In New York State, there's a section 55C form, which is like, it's a special, yes, okay, someone's saying they see why Mikki is my role model. I'm glad that you put that in there. It's so self-evident, I know. But the 55C form is actually a New York State form that will exempt, a veteran fills it out with their disability status, it will exempt them from taking a civil service exam. So there are special veteran-oriented 55C positions that a veteran can slot right into a state benefits, state salary, without taking that civil service exam, which can be very anxiety inducing for a lot of people. So 55C, I think, is the form. It's for New York State. And just again, for if anyone's interested at like state or lower level jobs, like Mikki said.
Wait, there's a question in the chat about why none of us have thought of running for office. I just want to say, as somebody who has been asked that question before, the smiling, pleasant persona you see here in front of you, she is great until someone decides to get in my face and yell, and then she exits the building. And I have watched some of our politicians and our political candidates' behaviors. I lack the capacity to pretend someone is not stupid. I will absolutely give it away in my face in my answer in a debate that I think they're a craven sack of crap. And I especially hold those feelings for many of the Republicans. I know someone's going to get mad I'm saying this, who stand up and say they love the military and love vets because I can see their voting records.
It's a lived experience panel. Our panelists are allowed to share whatever they want. It's not a reflection of Niswani, so.
Yeah.
Also, as terrible as this sounds, I'm just going to be very honest. Given what politically has been allowed to go on and what people have been absolutely allowed to say and do, go for it, Mikki. What are they going to do at this point?
You know what?
What hasn't already been done?
You guys are giving me a heart attack. Stop. Stop. I want everyone in Niswanis to love me, and if you let this continue, I'm gonna go cry. Stop.
Don't cry. Don't cry. I actually, listen, it's not a party affiliation thing. There are also other parties I have these same strong feelings about. I really have very strong opinions that we love veterans until they need something.
Mm-hmm.
We love military
Service.
service.
They love the idea of vets. They don't love the reality.
Yes. It's not even party specific. It's just that one today in my state.
A lot of veterans are really pragmatic. I'd like to just start a political party just called the Moderates. It's not divisive. It's just you solve some problems, work the situation along, less explosivity, less picking sides, and just be down to earth. I don't know if that would take
Guys,
off.
I'm really sorry. I know
No, I'm reclaiming everyone.
but we should probably
okay,
focus
Dylan,
back on trying to give resources.
Dylan, I love you. Yeah, but I'm reclaiming everyone's time. Whoever the commenter, whoever the audience member was that asked that, you are amazing and you just like caused me a lot of stress. But I'm a stoic and I'm an absurdist, so I think that's funny. So thank you. That's great. We're gonna move on. Aynisa, reclaim the time.
5 minutes left. Resources that you would recommend for families or veterans in the community, in the VA, any recommendations that you would give?
I would say the vet centers.
Hmm?
The vet centers are still pretty good. If you just Google, every city still has one, and they're community driven, group based, very mental health built, As a therapist, I've sent people to vet centers and they've usually had good experiences.
I would agree with that. VSOs are still a resource I would absolutely champion just because it's some place to start and work from. If I had to go for something a bit more specific, Samantha Greer works with the Hofstra Legal Clinic. Super good. She handles MST, trauma-informed care, discharge upgrades. She's specific with who she helps, but genuinely just like that sort of focused help is a really good resource to tap into. There are certain agencies like one I work for Fusco, Brandstein, and Rada. They handle aiding with discharge upgrades. They handle initial claims and appeals. Everything with initials and just legal advice in general is pro bono.
Another thing I think people, I've seen some people mentioning HUD Bash, and absolutely look into HUD Bash and county options for your housing. But another thing I think people will probably want to consider doing is literally temping, going and signing up with temp agencies when you are struggling with finding work. They are very good at helping you turn that military resume into something that was useful in the outside world if you're having a hard time getting in with spoke rehab or anything else. And if nothing else, if you cannot find a steady, stable job yet, you can absolutely find something that will keep the lights on and the bills paid and help you build up a better civilian resume along the way.
Tim, Jeremy, did you guys, oh, Ward, okay,
I was
now
just going to
I'm
say
coming on
the
to.
Post Office for Jobs has been a pretty good resource for veterans throughout American history, the last 60 years. And there's also USA Jobs, which tend to have some advantages for vets.
So later on in the year, Niswani's is going to, for clinicians, Niswani's is going to host 2 separate panels as follow-on panels that have this separate topic of education and veterans and jobs and veterans. Because as we talked about here, so much of supporting veterans is helping them survive, pay their bills, and literally have, be housed. So those 2 topics will be at future upcoming panels.
Oh, and one more thing, if you just go to the Small Business Administration and type in veterans, it brings up a whole page both about veteran-owned businesses and about loans specific to veterans who are looking to start a job or start a company, rather, start a business. Sorry, my brain is working. But it has training programs, funding, all kinds of things in one place.
I'm just going to say that as someone who lives in Massachusetts and works in Connecticut, and also have been an educator for the past 7 years, this is a little bit outside my wheelhouse where this conversation went within the last hour compared to the areas I thought it would go in. And that's not to say, I think there's a great conversation, a really important conversation that's been happening. It's just kind of, not where I'm at.
Sorry, I tend to focus in very much and take over a lot of space on what will work in the moment, because a lot of times we tend to talk about the future, and a lot of my work is around making sure people are capable of getting to the future.
Excellent. Okay, so Aynisa, do you want to close us out? Ward
Yes.
and Mikki, you guys, because Mikki, you came a little late, so if you feel compelled, if you feel interested, you are welcome to wait until 1:40. We're going to have there's 1,300 participants now. Those who want to stay will be able to stay. Ward has a special PSA, and then Mikki, if you want to just reclaim some of your time. I'm sorry, Aynisa.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to thank the panelists for their time today. The conversation did go in a few different directions, some of which were unexpected. So thank you for your patience and hanging in there and really just navigating through. I think that speaks very highly to the processes in supporting veterans and how they are just non-linear and sometimes unexpected. So it's a great metaphor to end the conference with, I think. But the panelists throughout the past 2 days have been absolutely incredible. Melanie, you've kept us organized, and Nell, thank you for that. But yes, they just appreciate the attendees for their participation and the panelists for their openness and their insight and sharing their experiences with us.
Okay, so I promised everyone Brent would sing. Now can you find Brent Russell in the people and elevate him to a panelist? Also, guys, Brent, he's a little nervous. He's never sung this song before. So can you put some like love for him in the comments? Because he's gonna be great, but I know he's a little bit, you know,
Nervous, yeah.
they're gonna flood the comments.
They're gonna flood the
Oh,
comments.
look at this. Look at the comments. Look, everyone's so exciting so excited for you to sing. Oh my goodness. Do you have your water? You have everything?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm actually.
And then after Brent sings, Nell will have some wrap-up comments about the CEs, just some reiterating. And then, okay, yeah, we're gonna do this first. That way you guys can not hear the important information. If I was a bad person, I would ask him to do this after the wrap-up comments, but it's a Saturday and you guys have families.
So I just want to personally thank everyone for attending this conference. You make our mission possible. I hope that it was all that you hoped for and even more, and we look forward to continuing to do this work. So I saw this song. Actually, I heard this song. One of my favorite singers did a cover on it, and I heard it, and I thought it was pretty fitting to sing for you. So it kind of, in my mind, reflects the relationship between a therapist, a clinician, and their patient. And in my head, I think sitting across from my clinician, because I'm in therapy myself, and when I come into the office, it's a safe space, and I receive from that space. So, all right, with all that being said, everybody needs inspiration. Everybody needs a song, a beautiful melody. For when the nights are long, 'cause there is no guarantee that this life is easy. Oh, and my world is falling apart and there's no light to break up the dark. That's when I look at you. When the waves are flooding the shore and I can't find my way home anymore, that's when I look at you. When I look at you, I see forgiveness. I see the truth. You love me for who I am. Like the stars hold the moon. They're right there where they belong. And I know I'm not alone. Oh, and my world is falling apart and there's no light to break up the dark. That's when I look at you. You appear just like a dream to me, just like kaleidoscope colors that cover me. You're all I need. You're every breath that I breathe. Don't you know you're beautiful? You're beautiful. Yeah. And that's it. Yeah, so like I said, when I think about the relationship, thank you very much, between a therapist and a patient, I think of it as a place where an individual can come in and be completely and totally honest, where there is transparency and trust in the room, in a place where there are no hidden agendas, no negative ulterior motives, but a place where I can be myself, a place where I could seek forgiveness from myself, a place where I could seek and find love and support. And we thank you all for being that for the population that we serve.
It's really silly that you were ever nervous. That was like, that sounded like you'd done it a million times before.
Thank you.
Did you see the comments going when you were singing?
No, my eyes were closed.
You have about 1,000 comments in there just praising how wonderful you are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nell, do you want to chat a little bit about the Cs just to clarify some of that for everyone as they head off or stay for the optional?
Yeah, so in just a second, I'm gonna drop the evaluation link in the chat. And it will be emailed to you, and either has already been emailed to you or shortly will be emailed to you. You'll need to complete this evaluation by Wednesday, the 13th. And then a week after that, so by March 20th, you will get their certificate emailed to you. Handouts with resources from sort of compiled from our panelists and then also from our Q&A will be included in that email with your certificate. Also, the recording of this conference and each of these panels will be on our YouTube page as well, so definitely keep an eye out for that as well. So now I think you know, if you need to go, you're welcome to head out. I think that there are, you know, some folks did want to kind of hang and
Right. So Ward has a PSA that he wants to share. He wants to discuss something a little bit more in depth. And then we just want to give Mikki Kendall back some of her time since she is calling all the way in from Chicago to support our New York vets community. So if you guys want to stick around for that, please do. Can we elevate Ward and Mikki?
Yep.
Is that possible?
That's fine. Let me just defer to Mikki. It was just a couple of stories that a therapist could use in practice if they wanted to, that you could just say a friend told you or something, but that's okay. Let's push it over to Mikki. I think she's a little more of a star right now, and I defer to her time.
I mean, I was just willing to stick around in case people had questions, wanted to keep the discussion going for a few more minutes. I am one of those weird vet success stories. And I know for some people, it's kind of like, well, how did you get into publishing? How did you do this? How did you do that? How do you bridge the gap between getting out and chasing your dreams kind of thing? But if people would rather do anything else, I am totally fine.
Yeah, if you have questions for Mikki or Ward or anyone to screen, because this is all optional. Can we end the recording? So this will be like really just a special thing.